Welcome into the All NFL Sunday Huddle. My name is Adam Hogue. Week 4, almost in the books. 2 more games tomorrow night, but your NFL Sunday for Week 4 is over. And we got a fun show for you tonight as we recap everything that happened today. 2 of my good All-City friends. Love doing shows with these guys. Bo Wolf from PHLY, covering whatever happened with the Eagles today. And we'll talk about that, of course, and sort of a similar result for the Cardinals as Johnny Venerable joins us from PHNX. Guys, not as fun of a Sunday maybe for you guys as it was for the Bears in Chicago, although it wasn't necessarily the most fun time even Bears fans probably had today. But appreciate you guys being here. Let's have some fun tonight.
Yeah, it's fun in Philadelphia when it's miserable. That's what it's all about.
Are you 5 wins and 23 losses in your last 28 miserable? Let me ask you that, because that's what true misery looks like for Arizona Cardinal fans and myself. 5 wins out of the last 28 dating back to 2.5 years. It's good times right now.
And pantsed by the guy you're still paying.
Yeah, today, we're going to get into it. I mean, this is the worst loss for Arizona Cardinal fans since probably like the no-show in the NFC wild card round against the Rams. Like it felt personal today, and it made you question everything about where they're going.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And then meanwhile here in Chicago, it doesn't feel great, but I'll tell you what, do you guys know, and I'm kind of giving away the answer to this question as I bring it up, but do you guys know who has the longest home winning streak in the NFL right now?
Wow, really?
It's the Chicago Bears. They've won 7 games in a row going back to last season. Who would have thought? Not me. I didn't know that until a couple days ago that was even on the table. But that is apparently where the Bears are at least winning some home games in a row. Well, we're going to get into all of that, but as we do here on the All NFL Sunday Huddle, first of all, appreciate everybody being here as we continue to build this thing. And we would also encourage you that to go check out the podcast feed, because the All NFL podcast feed is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Go subscribe to that too. You can listen to this at any time. Maybe you already are listening to this as a podcast, but available perhaps on your Monday commute, things like that. We greatly appreciate it. And wherever you're watching, whether it's on one of our, All-City networks, as I lose my voice here.
Oh, no.
To start tonight. Yeah. Pick me up, Bo.
You know what I'm thinking about right now? I'll give you a peek behind the curtain. We have this battle in my house over the air conditioning, and usually I'm losing. You know, my wife doesn't want the air conditioning on. It's like 75 degrees right here, but I'm in the basement and I am sweating my face off. Like I could use the cold air conditioning right now. Everybody else is asleep in the house. I might need to go turn it on so I'm not just like dripping this whole episode.
Well, it was 114 degrees here in Arizona yesterday. So I don't want to hear anything about sweating in late September for anybody not west of, I don't know, Utah or Arizona or whatever, New Mexico. I mean, we got burned on the field yesterday. We're getting burned outside. I was walking into Trader Joe's yesterday. It was 115 degrees. I'm like, enough is enough, guys. This is too much.
Yeah, that's tough. It was 100 degrees for the Eagles game tonight and this afternoon in Tampa Bay. So it's going around.
So this is the problem when you host. Yeah, I'm all right. This is the problem when you host 3 shows and try to coach in one weekend.
How'd you guys do?
We fight on. We got the victory Friday night.
Okay.
That one actually kind of came out of nowhere. But your reaction to Sunday Night Football. Let's start with that, as we like to do here. That's what I was trying to get to on the All NFL Sunday Huddle. Ravens, Bills. That sure got out of hand quickly, though, huh, Bo?
Yeah, I have been. I went into this season being a little bit Ravens skeptical. I was sort of fading them a little bit just because losing Mike McDonald, not just losing Mike McDonald, but losing two other guys on the defensive staff to defensive coordinator jobs, losing some important personnel. I thought they were due for some regression, and so they're only 2-2 now. But to see that the ceiling is still there, that this is a team that can play at as high a level as anybody in the league was obviously very encouraging, and tells you that they are not out of the mix of potential Super Bowl contenders. So I think a huge statement win for the Ravens tonight.
I mean, yeah, this was a game that I think a lot of sharps in Vegas liked as a bounce back performance from Baltimore. And frankly, I didn't see it that way coming into this. I'm glad I didn't bet it because we've been on the other end here in Arizona of the Josh Allen takeover, and I thought his MVP candidacy was just too strong. Like it was going to barrel through everything. And give them credit. Like they made him look about as average as you can make him look. He had the one ridiculous throw running off the sideline. And, I thought Keon Coleman, a lot of the concerns we had pre-draft scouting him came to fruition tonight. And so I think Buffalo is still very good. I still think they're the class of, in my opinion, the AFC. But going into Baltimore in a game that you felt like they needed to have, there was a sense of urgency there. And listen, like I thought Derrick Henry was washed after the first two games of this year, especially after that the Las Vegas Raider loss that they had. I mean, 200 yards on the ground, and it wasn't just the number; it was 8.3 yards per clip for Derrick Henry. So for me, like, do I think any differently of Baltimore? I don't. I think they have major limitations as you get into postseason play. I don't think Lamar Jackson's a great postseason player, as we've seen. I actually feel like Buffalo needed probably like a little bit of a humbling loss to kind of get refocused, because I think Kansas City, I'm sure we'll talk about it, has opened the door to a lot of these contenders in the AFC that have a bevy of weapons. So I think both these teams are firm playoff teams. I don't take too much into Buffalo's loss. This is what we like to call a good loss, but I am surprised that they got beat by 25 points.
Yeah, I could roll with good loss if it was, a little bit closer. It from my view of it, didn't really seem like a competitive game, except very briefly there to start the second half. They had some good things going. They scored. Josh Allen made an incredible throw, before right as he's about to go out of bounds, flicks it downfield, huge 50-plus yard gain. And then you're like, oh, well, maybe there were some games, we'll get into them, where it seemed like all of a sudden comebacks were in play, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, maybe the Bills are going to get going here. And then really seemed like the turnover on that weird play call by Joe Brady that just didn't really seem to go with the flow of how everything was going with the Bills moving the football, leads to the loose ball. Ravens recover. They go right down. They end up getting two scores really fast. And I was like, okay, well, the 5 minutes of the Bills being in this game, that ended pretty quickly. So I still think I agree with you guys. The Bills are in good shape. Josh Allen, to me, still been the best quarterback in the league so far this season. But, tough to maybe call this a good loss from my perspective when you weren't really competitive from the jump on Sunday Night Football, no less than a primetime game.
Are you of the mindset? Are you of the mindset that the Roquan Smith Twitter noise like that was like, hey, Chicago should have never let Roquan Smith leave? And it was like, didn't Roquan Smith want to leave? Like, wasn't that probably a parting of ways for both teams? Where, in all actuality, like the last thing the Chicago Bears need right now is a stud inside linebacker.
Yeah, I don't know that Roquan wanted to leave. I think he just wanted to get paid.
Yeah.
And so he played the leverage, and that was a weird saga. We could probably spend a whole podcast on where a player who didn't have an agent held out of camp, and then basically requested a trade on the morning of the team's fan fest in the middle of training camp, which I think really irked a lot of people. It's like, within the organization, it's one thing to request a trade and play that card. We get it. But like, did you really have to do it on the one morning where all the fans are excited to come to the stadium and training camp? So there were a lot of layers to that whole thing. And Ryan Poles was a new GM at the time. So the way that all played out ultimately led to him getting traded. And I think it's been a win-win for both teams because Roquan got his money. He's been a good player for the Ravens. The Bears ended up basically getting a 2-for-1, spending that same amount of money to get Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards.
Yeah.
And they really haven't looked back. They're linebackers. In fact, our conversation in Chicago is how Jack Sanborn's the third linebacker, and he should find a way to get on the field more because he could probably start for most other teams in the league. So it's really worked out for both sides, and good for Roquan Smith. He's been a good player for the Ravens. I think it's a great scheme fit, probably better fit than when the Bears switched back to a 4-3 when Matt Eberflus got to Chicago. So I think it's worked out. Any other final thoughts before we move on? I don't think we have to spend a ton of time on this Sunday night game because it was sort of a blowout. But if there's anything else you guys got on this game, go ahead and shoot it.
Well, I was going to ask you it this way. In the AFC, I think before the season, everybody probably would have said Kansas City, Houston, Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Buffalo were the 5 teams who could realistically go to the Super Bowl in the AFC. Is there anybody in there who you think, I mean, are you writing off the Bengals, and is there anybody else in the AFC who you think has jumped into contention for, like, could compete there?
You go ahead, Hogue. You go first.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because I'm kind of looking over the standings here to make sure I'm not missing anything. It's like we've lost a couple contenders.
Yeah, like Miami
I don't know
might have been considered a contender. Certainly, they don't look like it now.
Yeah, Cleveland's now 1-3. Not necessarily. I wasn't necessarily thinking of them as a Super Bowl contender, but they were a playoff team, right?
Right.
The Jets. I'm sure that we could talk about the Jets because the Jets want. They think they are. I don't know if I've ever jumped on that train.
Yeah.
And I've even questioned myself of overreacting a little bit to the Bengals. But, guys, they came to Chicago in August. I think I mentioned this on the show a couple weeks ago. And I just left that. It's one practice. And that's a really stupid thing to base things off of one practice in August. But I didn't make a big deal out of it. But they left Hallis Hall that day. And I'm like, that was the Bengals? Like, the Bears were easily the best team on both fields because, they do 2 fields in joint practices. You got offense, defense on both sides. And like the Bears won the day easily. And I just was like, Joe Burrow doesn't look right. The only thing he had to say was like Jamar Chase wasn't practicing. So you put Jamar in there and it looks a lot better. I don't know. I feel like we've lost some contenders, Johnny, but I don't know that anybody else has jumped up in there. Except maybe if you're going to say Pittsburgh.
I've got a team that lost today. They've lost back-to-back teams that I am 100% buying, and that's the Los Angeles Chargers. They were competitive with Kansas City without both tackles, without Joey Bosa, without Derwin James, and controlled a large portion of that game at home against Kansas City. And if you look at the Chargers' schedule, they finished the year, yes, Tampa, but then they have the Broncos, Patriots, Raiders. Like, I'm not saying that the Chargers are going to, make the AFC Championship game, but, if the Chargers, won 2 playoff games or won a playoff game and got to the divisional round, that would not surprise me. I just think Harbaugh, I buy Harbaugh, ultimate winner. They can run the football, and they have not been healthy to start this year. They're playing a lot of young players. They get a lot in the middle of the year, a lot of Browns, Titans. I just think that Harbaugh's style of play lends itself to late in the year. And I've always thought if they can just hover around 500 in the AFC and some of these other teams start to fall off, like Cleveland, like the Jets, that are, I think, a little bit fraudulent, certainly Miami now, I would be surprised if the Chargers didn't make the playoffs. They were rolling last week against Pittsburgh before Herbert went out, and they controlled most of today. They've played 2 really physical defenses. Watch when you see them start to play some of these middling teams. I think they've rehabilitated. Harbaugh has Quentin Johnston's career. They can obviously run the ball with J.K. Dobbins. So I think they're like an offseason away from being a real player in the AFC, and I think they'll make the playoffs this year.
I like that. I buy them as a playoff team. And I got to give you credit, John. You're consistent. You said the same thing 2 weeks ago on the Chargers, so I appreciate that.
Well, they're playing good teams. I could not believe how competitive they were without both tackles today. I mean, Rashawn Slater, Joe Alt, that's maybe the best young offensive tackle combination in the NFL. And every time I looked up at the TV, they were tied until late, and Patrick Mahomes did his thing. But if Mahomes, who threw that interception, if they don't fumble that interception, they probably win that game.
And I guess at some point you just and I think we do this all the time, obviously, but you got to give the Chiefs credit because they just all of these games, it's like they could have easily lost them, but they find a way to pull out the win, and that's what good teams do. It doesn't have to look pretty, and they lose Rashid Rice today, and and we're still down that line of who the hell is Patrick Mahomes going to throw the ball to. And I'm not sure it matters because he's Patrick Mahomes and he'll throw us the ball.
I mean, I don't think there's another team in the league, even the Bills, where if you lost your number one receiver, everybody would just be like, who cares? No big deal. They'll figure it out.
Yeah, I assume that they'll make a move for somebody before the deadline. They have no one left. There's nobody left outside of Xavier Worthy and Juju.
Well, I'll tell you what, that just reminds me because last year I thought there was maybe a chance that the Chiefs would make a play on Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney was in Chicago having a terrible year, not meshing with the offense. Basically just kind of fell out of, I don't know if it wasn't out of favor. I mean, Justin Fields loved the guy. So I don't know if it's the coaching staff or what. We still don't really understand what happened, health, whatever. But, with Matt Nagy being in Kansas City, it seemed to make sense. They needed wide receivers. Would they make a play at him at the trade deadline? Maybe there's some phone calls made. I don't know, but it didn't happen. Now Mooney, who I thought might sign there, I thought that made sense for him to sign there in the offseason. Yeah. He goes down to Atlanta, where, of course, Ryan Pace now works, and he's the GM that drafted him in Chicago, so you got that connection. But Mooney's kind of all of a sudden like a player again. I mean, he's been really solid for Kirk Cousins, and that's still a guy I look at that I thought the Chiefs could have traded for and probably should have signed in the offseason because I thought he would have been a good fit there, and they could use them.
Yeah, I'm a Mooney fan with Kirk Cousins now, and I think perfect for their intermediate passing game. And he was kind of neutered by what Fields and company couldn't do in a rhythm timing passing game. I think he would thrive with somebody like Mahomes. The problem is now Falcons look very relevant, but you're right. They need that kind of player to go underneath with Xavier Worthy. Cause I think Juju's kind of done. But there'll be somebody available for them. But I do think, as crazy as this sounds, they're 4-0. I think this is the most vulnerable they've been based on the fact that, the weapons aren't as robust as they need to be. Kelsey being a year older, yet another postseason run. It's crazy because they just lost. I think Buffalo has been much more impressive this year than Kansas City. Kansas City could easily be 2-2. The problem is anybody who wants to beat them is going to have to go into Arrowhead with them and their fans and the officials, by the way, in January. And that's a tall task for any team. You're going to have to be undeniable to go into Arrowhead. And I think Buffalo and some of these other teams have the firepower. Kansas City can burn a draft pick and add a receiver.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the teams who are definitely out of it. DeAndre Hopkins, maybe. I mean, I think Kansas City wants speed more than that, but it's still a little early for anybody who has a good receiver to be given up on the season.
Christian Kirk, another name to watch. I don't know if they trade him within the conference, but I mean, they've got Brian Thomas Jr. That team's going nowhere fast. They can blow it all up. He'd be a perfect compliment.
That's a great one.
That is a good one. Before we move on, I just want to give a shout out to Wives because my wife realized what was going on with my voice there and brought me some tea. And
wow,
how
about that?
That's how teammates pick up each other to get through the end of a NFL Sunday.
Do you mind asking her to flip on my AC?
Yeah, I don't know if she can do that, but yeah, that's coming in clutch here as we get through the rest of our all NFL Sunday huddle. What I wanted to do is kind of steal a show or a segment, I should say, from our CHGO Bears podcast that we did during training camp every day, and people really seem to like it. Seems like a good way to end a Sunday too in the NFL, and that's our best and worst. So, whatever the best thing you guys saw across the league, whether it was something you witnessed in the game you were covering or something else you saw, or the worst as well. Bo, I'll start with you. You can give your best and worst kind of simultaneously back to back.
All right, so I'm going to give you my worst first, and that is This is directly from the Eagles game. And this is two separate plays for the Eagles special teams unit. Now, the Eagles had a terrible game today on all three phases. The defense gave up 24 points in the first half, 3 touchdowns on the first 4 drives, absolutely no resistance at all. They looked awful. Offensively, 3 and outs on the first 3 drives. They look terrible. They didn't have A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith or Lane Johnson, so there's lots of baked-in excuses, but they looked awful. But on special teams, just embarrassing play. There was a punt, the only stop that they got in the first half of the game. Isaiah Rodgers, who is the jammer on one side, pushes the gunner for the Bucs right into Cooper DeJean, the punt returner, forcing a fumble, forcing a muff, and the Bucs then score a touchdown. So that's one play, and that's completely their own fault. It's the only stop they got on defense, and it turns into a touchdown anyway. And then in the second half, Keely Ringo, the jammer on the other side, just runs into Cooper DeJean on a different punt. So the two different jammers, both guys who were in the cornerback room with Cooper DeJean, both just get the guy cold cocked when he's not looking. And it's just like, how does Cooper DeJean go into the meeting room the next day? Like, guys, what am I doing out here? You're getting me killed. It was very funny. And then I'll give you.
For real quick, special teams. You're speaking my language, Bo. I love it. What do you got for best?
So best, I was going to just say that the Josh Allen touchdown or the Josh Allen throw when he's going out of bounds because that was sick. So instead, I'm going to ask you a question, Hogue, because I don't know if you caught this. I imagine it made its way to you, but also from the broadcast today, Tom Brady was talking about his free agency flirtations, and he said the place that he was closest to going, if not for Tampa Bay, was Chicago.
Yeah.
Did you? So you were aware of this?
I am aware. I still haven't heard the clip directly yet. The actual video. Yes, a bunch of people texted this to me. So I guess what's news out of this is him potentially saying that he was close to coming to the Bears. This story has actually been around before, and I think it was just one of those things that happened like 4 years ago that people forgot about. Okay. And now it's resurfaced because I actually, back when I was at NBC Sports Chicago, wrote a story on this. That it wasn't
the grindstone. No surprise.
It wasn't a story. Yeah, it wasn't a story that I broke, but did some reporting on. I want to say NFL Network originally reported it. But that the Bears were like the sleeper team involved in getting Tom Brady, and that the story at the time was that Brady didn't want to stay in cold weather, that he wanted to, go south, and he just really wasn't interested. I've since heard that like the Bears called on Brady and they definitely wanted him, but like they didn't do the type of full court press you should probably do on a guy who, is the greatest quarterback ever to live. And like, they
didn't sneakily invite him onto the owner's yacht when it wasn't supposed to be allowed. Yeah.
Like, so for comparison, like I heard when the Bears signed Julius Peppers a while back, like free agency, that was back when like free agency started at like literally at midnight.
I remember that.
Yeah. And like, so like Lovie Smith was like knocking on his door at 12:01, like at his house.
That's great.
Like, so it's like when you want a player like that, you should probably do that. Now, in the Bears' defense, this was COVID, right? This was 2020.
Yes, that's
and
right.
And it was right that free agency week was like the week the world was shutting down. So I have no idea what the actual rules are, what they could have done and couldn't have done. But yeah, I know the Bears wanted him. I don't know if they did everything they possibly could to get him. I don't want to accuse Tom Brady of anything, but I feel like almost him telling the story today was like maybe a little bit of an embellishment. Yeah. But if it's true that he was that close to coming to the Bears, the Bucs, first of all, Tom, you made the right move. He is Tom Brady. So maybe the Bears would have won a Super Bowl. I don't know. The way that whole regime ended up falling apart under Matt Nagy and everything, I find it hard to believe. But yeah, no, Bears fans were definitely paying attention to that today. But it was sort of known that they were involved. Didn't know that maybe he was taking it that seriously until today.
Well, I remember that free agency period was odd for Tom because at the time, a lot of people thought that the shine was mostly on Bill Belichick, which was laughable. Remember, like Tom was campaigning to go to like San Francisco. They said no thanks, right? They had like San Fran had like multiple shots at Tom Brady, and they were like, "We're good," which is hilarious in hindsight.
Crazy.
Raiders too, right?
Right. And so Tampa was kind of like the last resort, and then of course he goes there and wins the Super Bowl year one. But like I think I buy that. I think Tampa was probably like the last choice. Like I do buy like good weather. He wanted to stay on the East Coast, but like the market of Chicago, I'm sure was appealing. The fact that the Bears had never won consistently. They've never had a quarterback, so you have an opportunity to elevate that position immediately. I buy a little bit of that because I remember that free agency tour being wild because people thought he was washed because of his last year in New England. Like multiple teams had talked themselves into, we can't succeed without Bill, and he looked didn't look great his last couple of years. Let's keep what we have. I think a lot of teams are guilty of doing that.
Yeah. Instead, Bo, the Bears traded for Nick Foles.
That's right.
They were hey, why not have the quarterback that beat Tom Brady in the Super Bowl?
Exactly. Yeah, they took the guy who beat him.
Way more sense.
Right. That's advanced math right there. That's good football math.
That's exactly right.
So was that your best of the day?
I guess so. I mean, it was the Josh Allen pass, but I wanted to see that when I had the chance.
Yeah, fair enough. Johnny, best and worst of the day.
I'll subject everybody to what I witnessed today. Horrifying events in the desert. I'll start best because as much as this team is really struggling with fans, and I'll get to that here in a second, Marvin Harrison Jr. is advertised. He spent the first quarter today catching his 5th touchdown in the last 3 games. He's got 3 consecutive first quarter touchdowns dating back to week 2, and was the Cardinals' best player today. So, they have issues up and down their roster, but number 18, after that quiet week 1, is all but advertised. You could argue they should have gotten him the ball more. You still can't buy a Marvin Harrison Jr. jersey yet, especially at the team store. But 5 catches, 64 yards, a touchdown, nothing to write home about in terms of the grand scheme of losing. Actually, he was 5 for 45 and a touchdown. But on the year, Marvin Harrison Jr., again, 5 touchdowns, which if that doesn't lead the NFL, it's got to be close. Over almost 250 yards. He's averaging 16.2 catches, yards per catch. So, I mean, he's fabulous. He's great. I'm so glad he's on the team. They absolutely desperately needed a player of his caliber. And I thought we were going to get a shootout in Arizona. And that pivots to my worst, which was Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels came back to the state of Arizona and completely dog-walked this franchise. Cliff Kingsbury and his offense looked unstoppable with Jaden Daniels and Brian Robinson Jr. The Commanders rushed, gentlemen, for 216 yards at 6 yards per carry and 4 touchdowns. The Cardinals the last 2 weeks have given up over 400 yards on the ground. Keep in mind, the Cardinals were one of, if not the worst run defense in the NFL last year. And then they took very minimal steps to improve it. And guess what? The results still just as bad. Cliff Kingsbury put up 42 points, and I'm not even sure this final score of 42-14 was as close as it indicated, or not as close. It felt like 50-0. Jaden Daniels, what he was able to do, am I buying Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury long-term? I have question marks about that because I've seen Cliff Kingsbury collapse in hilarious and disappointing fashion here in Arizona. So if you told me Washington flamed out by November, December, I would definitely buy that. But for a single afternoon, Jaden Daniels, who was scorned by Herm Edwards and transferred to LSU from ASU, and Cliff Kingsbury, who is still being paid by the Bidwills, came into your building when you were a home favorite, when they were on the road for Monday Night Football. They did not go back to Washington. They worked out this week at ASU. So they haven't been in Washington in 10 plus days. They came into your building and put up almost double-digit points every single quarter. I mean, it was an embarrassing display of Cardinal football. I mentioned at the top of the show, probably the worst loss in 2+ years for this franchise. This is the kind of loss that starts to creep in doubt about, do we have the right people involved? Do we have the right quarterback? Do we need to start over again? The Cardinals have been rebuilding for 2 years. This is the second year of a rebuild. You've had 2 off seasons of robust cap space and draft picks. They had 7 draft picks in the top 90. They have players. But yet Washington comes in with, I think, a horrific roster, especially defensively, and a rookie quarterback in Cliff Kingsbury, and does that to you. It's inexcusable. It's one of the worst losses I've ever seen covering this team.
I mean, it sounds like it. And the one great thing about the NFL is it almost doesn't matter what market you're in. The storylines somehow just line up perfectly, even when they're bad perfectly. That's crazy how that played out with Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels. And, that's probably my worst is just, Jaden Daniels continuing to look amazing. I'm honestly more worried about the fact that they didn't hire Cliff Kingsbury than not drafting the quarterback. Yeah, I know. It'll probably, but the Waldron experience early on has not been amazing so far. It worked out a little bit better today for the Bears.
The Eagles interviewed Kingsbury as well, for the record. And went with Kellen Moore instead.
Yeah, I think the Bears just wanted insight on Caleb, and then, and they were like, okay, go wherever you're going to go. But
real quick, before you get into yours, doesn't this feel like, though, I know that they don't have a Bruce Arians, but go back and look at that Colts team that drafted Andrew Luck, and they started slow. Chuck Pagano was gone. Took them a while to get going, and then RG3 exploded, coincidentally, with Washington, and everybody was all over RG3, and it just took time for the better quarterback to emerge. Like, I don't think that Jaden Daniels is smoke and mirrors, but I also don't think what he's doing, 75%, 80% completion percentage through 4 games, that's not sustainable. That's not real football. And they've played bad teams and bad defenses. So give it time. I still would much rather have Caleb Williams over the course of, my tenure as a franchise.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, I think if you look at the next gen passing charts too, they sort of tell the story on their own. The Bears are letting Caleb have success and failure as a quarterback right now. And that's not to say Jaden Daniels, isn't playing quarterback, but you just, like, last week's passing chart was like everything was to the right. It looked like half field. Everything was dink and dunk. And Caleb's is honestly more of that today than it was last week against the Colts. But I keep saying this. I think the most likely outcome, and this is possible, believe it or not, is that 2 quarterbacks from the same draft class can be good and work out. But I do think, you got to give the Commanders some credit, and Cliff Kingsbury's credit right now for what he's doing. I did see some tweets today saying that Jaden Daniels is playing at an MVP level.
I saw that too.
Okay, I didn't see every snap today, so maybe I'm the idiot in the room right now, but I was just like, really? That seems a little strong. Your guys' reaction to that?
Well, I watched every snap, and he threw for 233 yards, a touchdown and an interception, and then he ran for a touchdown. Like, he was good. He's efficient. He's not, like, better than Josh Allen? Get out of here. Yeah. Like, I saw Josh Allen take over the game week 1. Like, think of the teams, by the way. The Commanders, who've they beaten? They've beaten 3 one-win teams. They beat the Giants, the Bengals, and the Cardinals, and they got smoked by Tampa week 1. Like, their season's already a success. Congratulations to them. I thought they were going to be terrible. I chalked this up as a win like a dummy before the season. But, like, it would not surprise me if they finish, like, 7-10 or 6-11. Like, I don't think they have good defensive personnel. I don't know what the hell the Cardinals were doing today. I think the more tape you get, fair or not, on Jaden Daniels, and the more hits he leaves himself susceptible to, like, the Cardinals do not have a serious NFL front 7, and they took advantage of that, and kudos to them. When they start playing real defenses, like Philadelphia's pass rush, assuming Dallas gets their act together, you saw what the Giants did with Thibodeau and Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence. They didn't score a touchdown that game. They kicked, 7 field goals to win that game? So I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on. Give them credit, but I don't think this is sustainable.
Yeah, I think they are both an anomaly. Like, if you look at the advanced numbers, it's by far the best offense. And if it was over the course of an entire season, it would be by far the best offense in the 2000s. The difference between them and the number 2 offense in the league right now is the same as the difference between the number 2 offense and the number 17 offense. That's how good they've been. But they're also, by the advanced metrics, like 31st or 32nd on defense. And so I think both of those things are going to move towards the middle a little bit. There's no way the offense can keep up this pace. At the same time, I think they have a very real chance of winning the division, because I don't think that either the Cowboys or Eagles are really scaring anybody right now. They're both very mediocre teams, and the Commanders are going to have an easy schedule. I think there is a chance that they can be both like a mediocre team, but also the NFC East champions.
So it sounds like, and I still need to get my best and worst. We sort of jumped ahead here, which is perfectly fine, because our next segment was going to be who are you buying, and we were going to list off some teams, and one of them was the Commanders. It sounds like none of us are really buying the Commanders, but I guess, Bo, if you're saying they could win the division, you're at least buying a little bit.
Yeah, I think even though
yeah.
the schedule has been relatively easy, like Johnny said, I mean that level of offensive play is what matters more than anything else in football, right? And so they're going to be playing a lot of teams like the teams that they've been playing. I don't think they're going to be playing it quite at this pace, but yeah, I think if they can have a top 10, top 8 offense, I sort of buy that they can be a playoff team if that's the bar.
Got it. All right, well, we got a couple more teams that we're going to
Yeah,
talk about in that
give us your
sense
best and
too.
worst.
Yeah, my best and worst. I'm gonna actually neither of these are gonna have to do with the Bears. They are gonna have to do with the NFC North, though. My best was, I mean, and this can be a decent transition to one of the teams we want to talk about, whether or not we buy or sell. But the Minnesota Vikings. At some point, we just got to hand it to Sam Darnold. What's going on here? And specifically, my very best was the touchdown throw to Justin Jefferson, which was one of those that appeared to go through a human body. It didn't really make sense how it somehow got into Justin Jefferson's chest, and he caught it. In Sam Darnold, 20 of 28 today, 275 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, QB rating of 123.4. I mean, good for him. It's been impressive. My worst has to do, I guess technically this is not NFC North. They still consider Aaron Rodgers part of the NFC North, even though he's very clearly not. But for the Jets to have a home game against the Denver Broncos and Bo Nix and only score 9 points and manage 3 field goals in their home stadium. I know the weather wasn't great, but that was I just can't imagine the level of panic going on with the New York Jets right now in New York. But that right there, only managing 9 points with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback and 3 field goals is my worst.
And then I don't remember which morning show it was that I had on in the background, but the reporting was that, like, hey, just so you know, you talk to people in that Jets building, they're still really mad about what Sean Payton said about Nathaniel Hackett. Like, look for them to run up the score today because they're still really pissed off about that. And like, okay, how'd that go for you guys? You must really love Nate Hackett. Like,
yeah, that's a great
tough
anecdote.
look.
Again, that goes back to the storylines, right? Like, and how these things just sort of line up. But yeah, you got Nathaniel Hackett going up against the Broncos, and
They're gonna make him pay for those comments. Like,
yeah,
okay.
and it's just that was remarkable that Sean Payton went there. I still remember that. That was like, okay. I mean, he's right, but you normally don't see an active head coach take a shot at another coach like that. But we're here for the entertainment. So we started talking about the Commanders. Guys, I want to know, are you buying the Minnesota Vikings? 4-0 at this point, and you can't knock their schedule. You can't do the Commanders thing with them. I mean, they beat the 49ers. They beat the Texans. They go into Lambeau today. That almost looked like it was going to turn into a blowout. The Packers ended up coming back and making it close, came down to a drop kick, onside kick, by the way. I don't know if you guys saw that, but their punter came in and tried a drop kick onside, which I don't even know the last time I saw that, but it didn't work. It went right to the Vikings. The Vikings recovered, win the game. We're talking about quality victories here, though, with this Vikings team. I'm still on the fence here. I don't really understand it, but are you guys buying this with the Vikings?
Yeah, yes. I guess the question is, what's the bar? Am I buying them as a playoff team? Absolutely. Am I buying them as a Super Bowl contender? Maybe. I don't know. Like, there's nobody in the NFC who is like definitively scaring me, especially with the Niners injuries. I think they're a top 5 defense by all the numbers. I think everybody sort of understands and believes that Brian Flores is one of the better defensive coordinators in the league, especially when he's like making chicken salad out of terrible personnel. And he's got pretty good personnel, like okay personnel now, and he's turning them into a really dangerous unit. And then on offense, they don't need to be, a top 5 offense. Right now, they're hovering around 10th. Darnold, I was skeptical of all the people who said, like, oh, you get Darnold in a real offense, like, let's see how he does. And he's sort of proven me wrong. And they've got plenty of firepower on the outside. I believe that they can be a contender for potentially the number 1 seed. And if you get the number 1 seed and you get home field advantage, that's hard to beat.
Yeah, I echo those comments. I think they're taking advantage of an NFC, and not based on their schedule. They've earned it, but they're gonna play some bad teams here down the stretch, and I think they're gonna pad themselves up to like 12 plus wins. I just don't know how that doesn't happen. Even if Darnold's play tampers off a little bit and people get more film and adjust to what he's doing with Kevin O'Connell, which is masterful. Kevin O'Connell is the coach of the year right now in the NFL. And then defensively, like you go back and check our tape when the Cardinals were looking for a head coach. Like our choice, realistically, given the options, we were all in on Brian Flores. Now, I don't know if he's ever going to be a head coach again, but I knew that he overachieved with Miami. He came to Minnesota, and they are immediately viable defensively. That's maybe the best coaching job defensively in the NFL this year. I mean, they picked off Jordan Love 3 times. The Packers got theirs because, LaFleur's fantastic, and they were at home. But, I mean, they were dominating that game. They dominated San Francisco. So, I think it's very realistic to Bo's point. Are they going to host, multiple playoff games? As long as Darnold, number one, doesn't get hurt or fall off a cliff, and can he just be viable? Can you get – this team really only needs, a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio from Darnold. And some games they're getting 3 or 4-to-1. And they're jumping out to these huge leads. And Minnesota, give them credit. They did something the Cardinals failed to do this offseason, and it's killing them. They went out and said, where are we struggling, right? We let Danielle Hunter go. Who'd they bring in? Jonathan Grenard from Houston, who's a stud in his mid-20s. Andrew Van Ginkel from the Miami Dolphins, somebody who had a familiarity with Brian Flores, to come in and help close these games when they jump out to a lead. So I can't say enough good things about what this coaching staff has done. You lose J.J. McCarthy when they did. I know they said Darnold was going to be the starter, but there was always going to be that temptation. And for them to seamlessly transition to Darnold and commit to him like this, it's not a good thing when anybody gets hurt, but I do wonder, Darnold has never done well with immense pressure from maybe an heir apparent behind him, but now kind of just being able to play loose and free, hey, if I don't succeed, there's nobody behind me taking my job this year. And it does kind of lean into some of these question marks about, if they win the division with Sam Darnold, there is no way they're turning back to J.J. McCarthy. Darnold is still vi enough. I think he's 27? I think he turns 28 next summer. He's got 11 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. This is somebody that they're going to conceivably build around. I know it's early in the year, but there's just more tangible evidence with them based on their quality of wins and how they've been winning compared to Washington, where Washington's a nice story at 3-1, but you can see the cracks in that foundation and how that's not likely to hold up over 17 games.
Yeah, it's a fascinating situation. I find it hard to believe that they would just stick with Darnold, but with that, I guess that's a conversation more for next year because we know J.J. McCarthy isn't coming back, so he's got the rest of the season to kind of work this thing out. I was fascinated. It was one of my underrated storylines coming into the year, which was, Sam Darnold's 1 year with Kyle Shanahan. Could that reboot his career? I think did I see something like Bill Belichick was quoted, and he does every show in the world right now, so there's a lot of quotes, but I think he said everybody likes Sam Darnold except for the Jets, something along those lines. I don't think that's fully true. In fact, I can tell you of one general manager I know didn't like Sam Darnold and did not work for the Jets, but nonetheless, we are seeing this sort of around the league with guys who are sort of getting a second chance in another organization. It's happening with Baker Mayfield right now too. And I think that's cool because in today's quarterback climate, we're so quick to, you could argue that's happening with Justin Fields in Pittsburgh too right now. I still think that's a small sample size, but the early results have been pretty solid, and that's fine. Some of these quarterbacks get cast off so quickly, and to see what Sam Darnold's doing almost gets a internship under Kyle Shanahan for a year as the backup, gets another opportunity in Minnesota, and it seemed like that was going to be hard for him to hold on to that job, just given how these things usually go with first round draft picks. But gets a little luck that goes his way with the injury. Bad luck, obviously, for J.J. McCarthy, but this is his show now. Knowing this division like I do, I don't think Detroit's going anywhere. Let's not forget Green Bay just won 2 games with Malik Willis at quarterback. So Matt LaFleur, he can have whatever goal line tirade he wants to have, like he had today over the timeout that he was very fortunate didn't cost them. His players bailed him out there in that moment because that was an unbelievably bad moment to take a 15-yard penalty when you're at the goal line just because the referee can't hear you calling timeout. they bailed him out there. Matt LaFleur is a good coach too. And I got to say, like, I think the one thing we're learning about the Bears so far is they're going to be frisky. Like, they're not going to be an easy team to sweep within the division too. So I just feel like eventually this is going to get tough for the Vikings. Can they still get in the playoffs as a wild card? I guess I'm buying that right now. But I'm not going to sit here and say that I feel great about them winning what's going to turn out to be a very tough division.
It's the best division unequivocally in the NFL.
So.
And it has the best coaching top to bottom. And again, that's why the situation with Eberflus and Waldron is so tough, because it's like what the Cardinals coincidentally had with Kingsbury forever. Pete Carroll, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Cliff Kingsbury, Kevin O'Connell, right? And Dan Campbell, say what you want, is doing a heck of a job, LaFleur, and then your guy in Chicago. I mean, it's tough. It's real. This isn't the AFC South. I mean, or the NFC South. Like when you're going up against these elite, oftentimes offensive head coaches. I mean, these are the guys that get national praise. They're always on national TV, and it puts so much more pressure instead of just hiding a team at the noon window and AFC South style or NFC South style. It's completely different.
And the conversation about the quarterbacks, and Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, and whether it's Justin Fields or not, like these guys who are proving that they can be successful and probably could have been successful with the right incubation and infrastructure around them. It does, to me from the outside, like it already puts the clock on Eberflus and Waldron. And do you want to waste another year if this is not the group that's going to get the best out of Caleb Williams eventually? Do you have to be proactive there for what is going to be best in service of getting this guy to be the best he can be?
Well, and of course, that was everyone's fear in the arguments for moving on, even in this past offseason, even though the defense really took a huge turn and was one of the better defenses in the league at the second half of last season. But Flus calls those plays, so it's like, man, how do you let this guy go? And he's running this great defense, but you have history and all these people saying well, come on, you got to get in whoever the next Kevin O'Connell is, right, to coach Caleb Williams. We'll see how it all plays out. To your point, Johnny, though, about the coaching matchups, that was one of the reasons why I thought this was a big game for Matt Eberflus today. You're going up against Sean McVay, who's the definition of what you were just talking about. The headline coach, the guy gets all the praise and deservedly so, has a Super Bowl ring. You would have polled anybody around the league who has the coaching advantage in this matchup today between the Bears and the Rams. And everyone, including myself, said Sean McVay. But I also said, in predicting the Bears would win, this is a game you have to prove you can win. The Rams are banged up. You're at home. You have to prove that you can beat a Sean McVay on your own field in a game where you're favored by 3 points. To the Bears' credit, they did not really have any of the same issues they had last week. In fact, guys, that horrible goal line sequence last week that got so much play, and deservedly so, across the country and laughed at by basically anybody on football Twitter who knows anything about scheme. Did you see how the Bears corrected that today? You might not have, but they ended up at the 1 yard line again. And what did they do? Well, instead of having tiny DeAndre Carter block a giant defensive end, they lined up in 23 personnel.
23?
23. Who do we even see 23 anymore? And not only were they in 23, one of the three was technically their backup center lined up at fullback. So, and they just pounded that ball. It also changed their goal line back. They gave it to Roquan Johnson, who all along should have been the goal line back, not Khalil Herbert. And Roquan Johnson behind a giant center playing fullback. What did they do? They pounded it right in the end zone. They got that measly 1 yard that they couldn't get. In fact, they lost 12 yards last week on that play. Way different play. Speed option doesn't belong in an NFL playbook. Big difference. Waldron learning. That should have been my best of the day, quite frankly. I blew that one because that should have been the best of the day, how the Bears corrected that whole fiasco from last week.
Well, and something very poetic about Chicago going to 23 when they need it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's special. You know what else is special? the Panthers and the Jags on deck for the Chicago Bears. Like, say what you want about how bad the Bears have looked. Nothing gets you right like a home back-to-back. They're at home back-to-back against the Panthers and the Jags. I mean,
Well, the Jags game is in London. Technically, technically a Bears home game, but it is in London. So yeah, back-to-back games against, what was that, 95 expansion teams? Right? They came in together.
Right.
94, 95. I think it was 95. But yes, schedule.
I'll tell you that I'm wearing a piece of NFL history here. This is an Urban Chop House shirt from Urban Meyer's his famous little diddling that he was doing. So when got that T-shirt.
That's fantastic. That I almost already forget that Urban Meyer was an NFL head coach.
Yeah, so does he.
A couple months. That was unbelievable. All right, one more team and on whether or not we're buying, and we picked this up a little bit. Then we're going to talk panic levels. But how about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? 3-1. Baker Mayfield running the show. Bo, you were obviously watching these guys closely today. Are you buying what's going on in Tampa?
I don't buy that they are a good team, but I buy that they can definitely win this division. This is not a good division. I am not super impressed with the Falcons, even though they pulled out that win today over the Saints. I think the Saints have some high upside on offense, but they have certainly come back to earth. I think that the defense for the Bucs is better than it has been over the first 4 games, because you have to remember they were without Vita Vea for 2 of those games. Yeah. And to watch him, the impact that he makes today, like he completely changes the entire scope of their defense. He's as good as it gets. And Todd Bowles has run really good defenses before. He has like absolutely owned the Eagles and completely has Jalen Hurts' number. He did it again today. And so I believe that their defense, which right now is like 23rd or so in the league, will be better than that and probably be a top 15, maybe borderline top 10 defense by the end of the season. The offense has been like bottom of the top 10-ish so far through 4 games. I think they're just okay there. Baker is so high variance, and when he is on, like he was today, he looked great. He got rid of the ball today quicker than any quarterback has in any game this season, under 2 seconds per time to throw, which is like they're rolling when they're doing that. But it also means that the Eagles defense did not adjust, and they weren't, they were not prepared for the quick game, which is their failing. I think that the Bucs have a good chance to win this division, but I don't think that they are, a threat to win more than a game in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they might have even peaked last year getting to the divisional round. I think they would need another favorable matchup, because they're not going to be a top seed, in my opinion, in the NFC. But I'm a big Todd Bowles fan. It's coincidental, like the Jets, who cannot get to the postseason. Like Todd had their last very viable season when they went, I think, 9-7 with Fitzpatrick and just missed the playoffs. And then, of course, they bungled it like the Jets do when they fired him. And he's a good man and a good coordinator and now a good head coach. He won a Super Bowl with Bruce Arians as his DC, and he really kind of seamlessly picked up where Arians left off. So I think, yes, they benefit from a terrible division where you get to play the Carolinas of the world twice, and I do not buy the Saints at all. I didn't buy them their hot start at all. I think they're going to come back down to earth as we saw today. And I think Baker Mayfield does just enough in the Alex Smith realm where, like a Tannehill, like an Alex Smith, as long as he's not turning the ball over and giving them opportunities to score points off of turnovers. I think Todd is masterful at stopping the run, forcing turnovers, forcing negative plays. They're going to be a viable team. I think they'll win probably right around 10, 11 games and win the NFC South. If not, they'll be in the playoff mix. So, yeah, it's a team that is very similar to last year. The difference is now Baker is like immortalized now as their starter moving forward, and it's got to be a good feeling for them, because I'm sure after they lost Tom Brady to retirement, they had a very short window with this roster that's ready to win now to go into the mindset of, well, how are we going to make this work? We don't want to have a full-blown rebuild, and give them credit. Very similar to what Minnesota is doing. They are finding guys who are available to come in and run the system that they want to run. Minus, Tampa lost their offensive coordinator to Carolina, and they've picked up seamlessly where they've left off. So give Baker Mayfield credit. Right now, he looks like a very viable quarterback in the NFC where, fair or not, there are a lot of teams that wish they could have a Baker Mayfield right now.
Well, we'll find out real quick here in the next 2 weeks, how realistic it is that they can win this division. They go to Atlanta and then they go to New Orleans. So, after having 3 home games of their first 4, they can prove it here in the next couple weeks. I got to say right now, I got to buy them as a playoff team. They were a playoff team last year. I think 2 of their 3 wins so far are impressive. I mean, obviously you go into Detroit and you win that game. I mean, that's a great win. I think the way in which they beat the Eagles today qualifies as a good win. And honestly, that Commanders win is starting to look better too. So I don't know how to explain what happened last week against the Broncos. They weren't really competitive in that game. But, again, like Bo brought up, Vita Vea wasn't playing. That makes a huge difference. So it counts for something. And this is where I throw in my own fantasy struggles. But one of these weeks, I'll play Baker Mayfield the right week. So I did not play him in week 1, week 2, or week 4. I did start him last week when he did nothing. So that's been very frustrating to figure out what the hell is going on with Baker Mayfield. But overall, he's got to give him credit. He's been a much better quarterback in Tampa, and I think he's more than viable to keep this thing rolling and get them to the playoffs. So I am buying the Bucs. Let's shift the conversation to panic levels, and we'll start with a team that we mentioned earlier that must be going through huge levels of panic after what happened today against the Broncos, the New York Jets, and just all the hype. Now 2 years in a row, and now Aaron Rodgers is actually playing, and they managed 3 field goals today against the Broncos. How legitimate should the panic level be with the New York Jets? Bo, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what your expectations were. Like, this is about what I thought the Jets would look like. Mediocre and a really good defense and an offense that could maybe beat up on bad teams. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that. I think if you thought that the Jets were a serious contender, you were the one out of your mind. Maybe you're the one with the brainworms. And so, I think this is about what I was expecting from the Jets. I think they are a team that's going to be fighting to maybe make the playoffs as a wild card team, and that is about their ceiling.
Yeah, I'll echo those comments. I think the Jets have a ceiling of about 9 wins. Rodgers looks old and slow to me. I mean, no passing touchdowns today. I don't care if they've had Patrick Surtain or not. Like Vance Joseph, he's a fine defensive coordinator. Like you're playing Bo Nix. You've ample opportunities to put that game away. You're in the red zone constantly, and you can't throw a touchdown pass against Vance Joseph's defense. Like that's laughable to me. I don't take Robert Saleh seriously as a head coach, and I certainly don't take Nate Hackett seriously as an offensive coordinator. Like I think they blew their window with Rodgers when he got hurt last year. And now they're just trying to salvage the deal of, can we save our jobs? Can the coaching staff save their job? Can we just get into the playoffs? Because I think if they miss the postseason, like I think you're starting over. Like Rodgers, to me, if he's not done at the end of next year, maybe he's got 1 more year after this year. That's it. Like you're not suddenly getting more viable at his age with his skill set. To your point, Bo, like they beat 2 really bad teams the last 2 weeks. And now the schedule, I think they play Buffalo, they play Pittsburgh, they play the Vikings. They play a bunch of viable teams offensively and some good defenses on top of it. So, to me, there are serious limitations. Plus, they're just a really bad watch. Like, there are a lot of teams that aren't fun to watch or that aren't winning, but they're a fun watch, right? Like Philadelphia feels like it's soap opera every week when they play because of the Sirianni factor, and they've got Saquon. They're 2-2. The Jets are the opposite. Like, you could not pay me to watch a Jets game, especially today. Bo Nix versus Aaron Rodgers in a field goal fest might be the worst matchup of the day.
Yeah, that just looked and seemed miserable from start to finish. I'll tell you what, though. Jets, Vikings next week in London. I mean, that's just I don't know what the look ahead line is. I haven't checked it yet. I guess I can check it here. But that to me has just like weird, wacky results written all over it, where the Vikings end up losing their first game and the Jets look great or something like that. And it's just like you don't know what to make of it because they all, it's in London in the morning, and
There's some kind of like interesting cocktail that Aaron Rodgers can put in his body in Europe that's allowed there and it's not allowed in the States. And all of a sudden he goes back in time. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you could probably take a train over to Germany just while you're in London. And let me see. I think I have the opening lines here. Vikings are a 2.5-point favorite over the Jets.
Yeah, a little bit lower than I would have thought.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, let's talk about the still winless Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm guessing at 0-4. Doug Peterson, Bo, is he the first coach that gets fired here?
I think it's certainly possible, but I mean, I don't think that it should stop at Doug. I think they got to axe Trent Baalke. I think they got to sell the office furniture. I think this is an everything must go situation.
Who would have thought that another Trent Baalke situation wouldn't work out?
Well, that's the thing is like you cannot pretend that you are a serious NFL franchise when you're like you're handing the reins over to Trent Baalke, right? Like this is exactly where this was destined to go. I feel a little bit bad for Doug Peterson. Because it's not like he has much power there, but I think his comments after the game today were like, oh, I don't know why would you even ask about my job security? What kind of question is that? And then he's putting on the players for the execution. I think this is a situation where, to the conversation we had before about Caleb Williams and the quarterback incubation, they got to start over and hope that they can salvage Trevor Lawrence's career, bring in somebody else who can work with him, put together an offense that works, and a general manager who is not just sort of a walking joke.
If Philadelphia keeps Sirianni, Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels are going to coach the Jaguars next year. I think Bill Belichick comes back into coaching. I think he's waiting to find a franchise quarterback, and I think he thinks probably enough of Trevor Lawrence. And McDaniel's working with Trevor Lawrence. They have some talent on that team. They've been drafting in the top 10 for God knows how long. Like they have real players there. Brian Thomas Jr., they have a tight end. They have multiple running backs. They have a pass rush. They're just so dysfunctional. You need a culture changer, and Bill could come in and sell Shad Khan on that. So unless Jeffrey Luna sweeps in and steals them away, because I think Belichick probably prefer Philadelphia. They're just a better operation top to bottom. I could see Belichick and McDaniels ending up in Jacksonville in January.
Well, first of all, nobody should be doubting you after you predicted that the Panthers were going to bench Bryce Young 2 weeks ago, and which everybody was like, how could you call that now? It happened like hours later, which was a fantastic call. I think you're right, because I think Shad Khan has been looking for shortcuts for a very long time, like just bringing in somebody who's gonna just take things over, and this person has had success before. They will have success here. It's like Urban Meyer. It's like Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke. Like I think he would absolutely sign up for that if he could.
Yeah, that's a good call. He's got the money. The quarterback is in play. I mean, you can believe in Trevor or not believe in Trevor, but he's got the money, and so we know the quarterback's not going anywhere. And that this is just your classic NFL playbook of it's going to lead to a head coaching change. And unless they get this thing turned around quickly, they get the Colts in Jacksonville next week, and then the Jags embark on their 2-week London trip that they always go on. So that's where they'll play the Bears and face the Patriots in back-to-back weeks.
That's so wild that it stays in London for 2 weeks and plays 2 games there. It blows my mind.
But they embrace it there, I guess, or at least the owner does. So good for him. All right, last one we want to touch on real quick. At 1-3, the Cleveland Browns losing to the Raiders today. Seemed like they actually briefly took the lead, and then it ended up coming back via penalty, and then that ended up being it. So they are now at 1-3. The Deshaun Watson, talk about predictable things gone horribly wrong. I mean, duh. And this is just where they're at right now. It was actually impressive that they hung on. I felt like as long as they did last year with Joe Flacco coming in, all the quarterbacks they had, Kevin Stefanski, we just by default had to give him a lot of credit. But now at 1-3, I don't even know where they go from here with the Cleveland Browns, but the panic level has to be high.
Yeah, I don't think there is no other team in the NFL where everybody just sort of understands what's going on. Like this is a pretty good team that has one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, and that is what is sinking them. And because they have committed to him, and because the owner committed to him over the coach and general manager's head, there's nothing they can do about it. They got to just keep rolling this guy who's terrible out there. Since he got to Cleveland, I looked it up. 35 quarterbacks have started at least 15 games, and in EPA per dropback, Deshaun Watson is 33rd. The only guys he's ahead of are Zach Wilson and Bryce Young. So he's behind Mac Jones and Sam Howell and Will Levis and Kenny Pickett, like these terrible quarterbacks. He's been awful, and we've seen Kevin Stefanski with anybody else at quarterback, they have a very functional offense. And this year with Deshaun Watson, they're 31st in the league in offense, and their defense is back end of the top 10. It is like, it must be such a maddening situation for Stefanski, for Andrew Berry, for Jim Schwartz, for the good players on that team to know that like this is a team that could contend if they had any sense of just competency at quarterback, and that is what is sinking them. And until they can either like convince Deshaun Watson to retire or force him to the bench, they're going to be bad. And that's just the situation that they have, and everybody in the league knows it.
Yeah, they have that out clause that came to light a couple weeks ago where if he gets charges or sued again or something happens, that they could try to get out of it. And you got to figure that they're going to spend the majority of this offseason trying to do that. I don't know if they'll be successful. Maybe there'll be a buyout. But like Stefanski's, if he's not an A coach, he's a B++ coach. And they have top to bottom, Bo, you mentioned it, elite personnel. But when you've got just the top of your franchise rotting at the quarterback position, it impacts everything. I mean, they won games with Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco won the game today in Indianapolis, like kept the train on the tracks. Like, I thought that was a mistake not keeping him in the locker room, but it's obvious why they didn't do it.
Right, they couldn't because Pannone was better, yeah.
Right, and so they've got like 5 wins written all over them, and then I think they're going to spend the offseason trying to do contract gymnastics, getting him out. You have to, because again, you're going to lose if you haven't already the buy-in of your team, your coaching staff. Like it's the worst contract, if not in NFL history. Like certainly in Browns history, but it could go down as certainly the worst contract ever given to a professional athlete. I think the worst trade is going to be the Bryce Young trade, but the worst contract in terms of guaranteed money is going to be Deshaun.
They gave up picks too.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Is I think pound for pound, just looking at a trade, I'm with you on the Bryce Young situation, but like in terms of overall transaction.
Yeah.
This was a trade and a contract.
Yeah.
And it was just doomed from the start, it seemed like. And I think we're at the point, guys, where we've all been covering this league long enough that you eventually reach a point where like the guys in the locker room know. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So they know what you guys just said, that Joe Flacco probably would have been a better option. And they all understand exactly what we're talking about, and they're just sort of stuck in this position. And then that really starts to affect your locker room and the belief in everything going on. Your want to stay a part of this thing if you happen to be a free agent, or if you're a free agent elsewhere wanting to sign there. Now, usually money talks at the end of the day, but there are things like that factor in. So this just seems like it's doomed. Of all these teams that we've talked about, well, I guess the Jaguars are toast, but I feel way better about the Jets than I do the Browns right now. For and sure. Yeah, it just seems like a disaster there in Cleveland with as long as Deshaun Watson's going to be there. And then like once they move on from him, I mean, I guess there's always a chance someone else signs him, but why would you, with all the baggage that comes along with it right now? I mean, you can't even point to the belief in him as a quarterback after what we've seen in Cleveland.
And I mean, does he even want to play? He's got all the money he needs, right? Like he doesn't want to go somewhere and be a backup, I presume, right?
The Browns deserve it. They sold their soul when they did that deal.
100%.
When he was at the height of his legal issues at the time. I think it was just people, civil suits. Like, get it together as a franchise. You deserve that as a franchise for doing that. And it's unfortunate because the fan base doesn't deserve that. No fan base does. Like I'm complaining about the Cardinals loss today, and they've been terrible for 3 years. but I just wouldn't feel good rooting for a team with him as my quarterback and feel good about cheering for box scores and statistics and wins. Like that's so secondary to everything else that's gone on with him. Like just it ruins the NFL experience as a fan.
Well, guys, let's end the show by quickly touching on two of our other all-city teams. We talked about the Jets side of that Jets-Broncos game, but the Broncos do come out with another win. Somehow good. They're 2-2. Bo Nix, the stat line certainly was not pretty. Let's see. He finished 12 of 25 for 60 passing yards. Did have a touchdown, but I don't know that the Bo Nix arrows off to a hot start, but the Broncos have managed to win back-to-back games here, as ugly as today was. This seems like, from my perspective, not sustainable, especially factoring the rookie quarterback. But, I guess take the win however you can get him when you go face Aaron Rodgers in New Jersey.
I mean, I think their defense is really good and has been through 4 games. Just looking at the numbers, I think they're third in EPA per drive and fourth in success rate. And I was watching the film of the game last week against the Bucs to prepare for the Eagles game. And I mean, guys are flying around. Like Nick Bonito is beating Tristan Wirfs around the edge. DJ Jones is killing it inside. So, like, I don't think that the defense is going to carry them to the playoffs or anything like that. But good on them for the defense looking as good as it does. But yeah, I mean, I'm selling any Bo Nix stock. I think like hoping that he's going to be Sean Payton's next Drew Brees is kind of a hopeless exercise.
I'm with you. I watched Vance Joseph in Arizona, and again, like I don't have sour grapes that Vance Joseph and Cliff Kingsbury are succeeding as coordinators. Like, good for them, but I've also seen them succeed in September and October and completely flame out as the year goes on. So I think this team, listen, if they win 7 games, like, they're not going to say publicly that that's a win, but I think that's a win with Bo Nix. Like, and there's severe roster limitations. Like we talked about Cleveland potentially having to eat the Watson contract at some point. Like, the Broncos are still in dead money cap hell with what they did with Russell Wilson to some extent. So they won't have an opportunity to really take advantage of Bo's rookie contract until next offseason. So I think if you can buy Sean Payton sticking around for 5+ years, this team's on the right track. But I think he's got flame out written all over him, because I don't think that they're ever going to be in a position to contend with Harbaugh now and Justin Herbert and certainly Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. I think they'll always have a ceiling with his limitations as an athlete, that being Bo Nix.
Yeah, my comp when Sean Payton took that job was John Fox going to Chicago. The ride had kind of ended. And now there was one difference in that Sean sat out a year, but they're also close friends. But Fox basically showed up to Chicago and was like, all right, this isn't the greatest job of all time, but there's no quarterback. Well, at least at that point, Jay Cutler was still there, but they were moving on. And it was like, okay, how many more paychecks can I collect here before I go off into retirement? Now, I will say, I think Sean Payton's been way more invested to this point than that. That was just my comp at the time. But I tend to agree, Johnny. I just don't know how long this thing's fully going to last. And my thoughts on Bo Nix have already been communicated on this show many times. Just not very hopeful about it. I'm sorry, but I will. Here's my shout out to the.
I thought your comp was going to be John Fox, because Bo Nix is as old as John Fox was when he got to Chicago.
Yeah. Look, though, you go on the road, you win back-to-back games, and all of their games, their 2 losses, they lost by 6 and they lost by 7. So, to your point,
Tampa and New York, those are tough road trips for Denver. Those are good wins.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, the defense is going to keep them in games. It's just, I don't know how that adds up to enough to go to the playoffs. You got, especially in that division, you got to play the Chiefs twice. We talked earlier about the Chargers. Go ahead, Johnny.
Can I just say, like, what's with everybody in the NFL but the Cardinals playing just like awful teams every other week? The Cardinals have played the Buffalo Bills, then they get the Rams, a McVay coached Rams team. Then they get the Lions. Then they get a Commanders team that's 3-1. Then they have to go to San Francisco. Then they have to go to Green Bay. Then they host the Chargers. Like this is the big. They're a fourth place team. They're a fourth place schedule, and they play just the biggest juggernaut of a schedule. And every time I look at somebody else's schedule, it doesn't matter who it is. It's like Panthers, Titans, Jaguars. Like, it doesn't matter. Any team that I pull up on ESPN, that's how it looks. And I'm just like, good Lord, can we get a cupcake schedule one time? And I'm not even counting like the NFC West games. It's like the decision makers, man. It's just a gauntlet.
I'm looking at these stats from the game today. Did you guys see this? So Cortland Sutton today had 3 catches for 60 yards. Do you know how many yards Bo Nix threw for in the game total?
No.
60 yards.
That's
he had all of his yards.
We had negative yards at half.
12 for 25 for 60 yards, and Cortland Sutton had 60 of them. Now, there were a couple passes completed to other guys for 3, -2, and -4. But 60 all of his receiving yards. Threw 25 passes for 60 yards.
Well, I hope that defense really is legit. That's fascinating right there. That's even possible, and to win the game too. To win the game.
Out here, the Bears are winning games without scoring offensive touchdowns. You got Bo Nix winning games with his rag arm against bad teams. Like, I want that in my life. It's like that meme. I've seen what you do for other people. I want that for myself. I don't want to play Pro Bowl teams every week.
I will say though, it's just go peek at the Bears' second half schedule, and especially like the last 6 or 7 weeks. That's a gauntlet, and they have 2 Thursday night games in there too. Well, one's on Thanksgiving in the morning, but night game on the 26th, like right after Christmas on Thursday night too. So they're gonna get it late. They play they're in the toughest division, and they don't play any divisional games until mid-November. So they're all lined up in the second half. It's gonna be really bad for them. So maybe that's when it gets softer for the Cardinals. I don't know. Let's talk about the Cowboys too, real quick, before we get out of here. They played obviously on Thursday night. I'm just curious from you guys, your perspective. They get the win over the Giants. They don't cover because Aubrey misses his first field goal of the season. He's been so lights out. It seemed like a game they were probably going to win the whole time. I don't think it was necessarily impressive, though. Are you guys buying this Cowboys team? I mean, Bo, you already said earlier you could see the Commanders winning this division.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty underwhelming performance from them coming off the Ravens game. I mean, they own the Giants. I think it was like 12 in a row or something like that. They've beaten them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I was not super impressed. I think the offense will be better. I know that their running backs are not very good, but I believe that Dak over the course of a season can get them to a top 10 level. And maybe with Mike Zimmer, they can get to like a competent level on defense. But that, like, the middle of their, like, the defensive tackles are as bad as there are in football. I think everybody can run on them up the middle. They continue to get a little bit injured. I know DeMarcus Lawrence got hurt. So I think they will compete for the division. I think they will compete for a playoff spot, but I don't think they have an upside that matters.
I actually think, like, if you're talking about regression for the NFC and some of these other teams ascending, like the entire NFC North, like, I think Dallas wins like 7 games this year. I think they have that much limitations in terms of their playmakers. Like, their running game is atrocious outside of CeeDee Lamb. Like, Brandon Cooks was nice last year. He's seemingly taken a step back. They lost their tight end. And if they have legitimate long-term injuries to Dexter or to Lawrence and Micah Parsons, like, they're going to get run on constantly defensively. So I think that Giants game, that was a winnable game for the Giants. And, for whatever reason, they bungled it like they do with most games. But, I mean, Dallas' schedule, they play a lot of real teams. I still like Philadelphia over Dallas, not necessarily from a coaching perspective. I think Philadelphia, when they're at full strength, it's not even comparable, the weapons that Philadelphia has. I think there are serious limitations now asking Dak to carry this team. Mike McCarthy without Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn, he worked the Cardinals today. I think he's a much better defensive coordinator than he is a head coach, respectfully. And I'm not buying down. I think this is a regression year. I think they've lost too much talent. They didn't make any moves of note in the offseason. Like Tyler Guyton at tackle's fine, but outside of that, like if you're picking a team that they got hot last year from Dak, and CeeDee had the renaissance, and Brandon Cooks, right? And they found a groove at the right time. They stole the division from Philadelphia. I don't think they're going to be able to dig themselves out of like mediocrity this year. I think they're going to be right around 500, if not a little bit worse.
Yeah. And then if they're only winning 7 games, that might be another team we got to talk about hiring Belichick.
Well, I don't know if Jerry would welcome that kind of presence, though. That's the thing. Like, it feels like Shad Khan would be like, hey, Bill, do everything for us. Whereas, like, I don't even know who the Cowboys would hire at that point. Somebody would have to commit to Dak now.
Well, yeah, because they paid him. Similar stories in both spots there with Jacksonville and Dallas. Quarterback's been paid. Who's going to come in there and coach them? All right, time for bed on this Sunday. It's been a long Sunday. It's been a fun Sunday, as it always is. Bo, thanks for staying up late on the East Coast. And Johnny rushing over from your long post-game show, I know, too. And it's always fun. 2 more games tomorrow night, guys. I'm okay with these 2 nights. I know not everybody loves them.
I like it too.
We miss so much action on Sundays. I'm okay with two games on Monday night. We can get a couple monitors going and watch 4 teams instead of 2. So I'm all for it, and hope everybody's enjoying the show. We will continue to be knocking this out every single week throughout the NFL season. The All NFL Sunday Huddle. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the All NFL channel as well. Even you might be watching this on CHGO or PHNX or PHLY, wherever you're watching it. But there is an All NFL channel as well. Go subscribe to that, as well as the podcast version. Help grow the show. We greatly appreciate it. Always good bringing our talented list of NFL reporters and analysts all over this great company at ALLCITY together on Sunday nights to recap the days. And we mostly appreciate all you guys here watching, listening, however you're consuming the show. Enjoy the week, everyone. Enjoy the football on Monday night as well. We'll talk to you next week.
We all silly like the mayor.